Hello everyone. Back again with film recaps. In this video, I'm going to recap one of the horror mystery films from 2015, titled Sinister 2. Before we get to the storyline, I'd like to wish everyone a happy and great day. Without further ado, let's get straight to the storyline. The second part of this movie also opens in sickening fashion. A family of 3 tied to crosses in a cornfield like scarecrows, and then someone throws a burning lighter at them, causing all of them to burn alive. However, it turns out to be only a nightmare for a boy named Dylan, who awakens in his bed. He suddenly hears creaking noises from the closet, and notices a shadowy figure in the darkness. And then... in the next scene, we meet an ex-cop, who arrives at a church to make a confession. The priest recognizes him as the deputy who previously worked with true crime author Ellison Oswalt. It turns out the entire Oswalt family was mysteriously murdered, and their daughter vanished. However, the deputy reveals that he left the police force after what happened to his friend. The priest claims that the Oswalt case is related to something supernatural, and advises him to stay away, as he could suffer the same fate as his friend. But the ex-deputy claims he can't sit still, because what happened to that family will happen again. The scene then cuts to a supermarket, where we see Dylan and his twin brother, Zach. The boys are playing with each other while their mom, Courtney, is busy shopping for groceries. But moments later, she notices a shady man clicking her pictures, and following her inside the supermarket. This worries her greatly, so she proceeds to leave in a hurry. Courtney then explains to the security guard that the creepy man just touched one of her boys. After she flees with her sons, the shady man calls someone and reports that he just saw her in the supermarket. In the next scene, Courtney and the kids arrive at a remote location, as it turns out they have been living in a farmhouse of an abandoned church. Meanwhile, we see the ex-deputy at his home, calling someone to ask about the same church. He is relieved to discover that it is vacant and decides to go there. He also appears to be working on something important. The investigative board features photos of various families, a ghostly figure, and a newspaper clipping, revealing how the Oswalt house was burned down following their murders. Later that night, when Dylan tries to sleep, he is suddenly approached by a ghostly-looking kid named Milo. The boy asks if he can hang out for a while, and although Dylan is initially hesitant, he eventually agrees. Milo then takes him down to the basement, where he shows him a box containing reels and a projector. Next, he begins setting up a projector to play a video, when another boy named Ted also appears. Soon after, the video starts, and it turns out to be Ted's, where he and his family are going on a fishing trip and having fun. However, things quickly turn horrific when all the family members, except Ted, are seen hanging upside down from a bridge. Then, a barbaric alligator appears, and begins devouring them one by one. Dylan is deeply disturbed by the sight, but Milo forces him to watch the entire footage. However, the boy refuses to comply and immediately rushes to his room. The next day, the ex-deputy arrives at the abandoned church with some gasoline, revealing his intention to burn it down. But he's left stunned to see a family there, as he thought the place was abandoned. Courtney immediately accuses him of trespassing, so the ex-deputy reveals that he is a private investigator, but this only seems to anger her more. She assumes that her abusive husband must have sent him, and offers to pay him to leave them alone. However, the man explains that it's all a misunderstanding, and asks if he can come inside for a cup of coffee. She then leads him inside, and the ex-deputy says he did not expect anyone to be here. He also reveals that he was a friend of Ellison Oswalt, and was helping him with the case before he was murdered. Courtney remembers the man from the news, and asks if he's here because a similar kind of murder happened at this church, to which the ex-deputy says yes. Next, he shows her some creepy symbol pictures, and asks if she has seen any of them around the house, which she denies. Since it's getting dark, the ex-deputy decides to leave. He will return tomorrow for the investigation. He then heads to a nearby motel, and starts searching for information online. He discovers details about Courtney and her rich husband, along with an article about a family slain inside Westminster Church. Just then, Dylan's face suddenly appears on the screen and the laptop powers off. At this moment, he notices the reflection of a scary figure on the computer screen, which scares the shit out of him. Soon, the laptop powers back on. On the other hand, Milo wants to show Dylan another video, but the boy refuses and goes back to sleep. Unfortunately, he soon begins to experience the nightmare of people burning in the cornfield, which deeply disturbs him. When he finally wakes up, he heads to the basement, and meets Milo, Ted, and another girl named Emma. They tell him to watch the video, promising that it will make the nightmares go away. Upon hearing this, Dylan finally agrees, and Emma begins to show him her family video. The video initially seems like normal footage of a family celebrating Christmas and decorating the tree. But the scene abruptly shifts to all of the family members, except Emma, being tied and buried in snow. They slowly freeze to death in an agonizing and horrific manner. Dylan is so disturbed by the footage that he quickly rushes upstairs. The next morning, Dylan notices the kids standing outside in his front yard. This is when his brother, Zach, snarkily comments that he can see them too. At this moment, the ex-deputy returns to the house, so Courtney takes him to the church hall, where he can begin his investigation. Once alone, he begins to examine old photographs of the crime scene, and compares them to the current situation. The ex-deputy doesn't find anything useful, but soon realizes that he's not alone, as he hears someone walking around. And then suddenly, an evil entity suddenly appears in front of him before disappearing. Soon, the ex-deputy receives a call from someone named Dr. Stomberg, who claims to be Professor Jonas' colleague. It turns out that Professor Jonas is an occult expert, and a good friend of the ex-deputy. The man had also been helping Oswald with his new book before the writer died. Stomberg states that he needs to meet him urgently, and reveals that Professor Jonas has gone missing, and left behind something unbelievable. Later, when the ex-deputy is about to leave, Courtney's ex, Clint, suddenly shows up to take his sons, accompanied by the local police. Dylan is horrified to see his abusive dad, and ends up wetting his pants, so Courtney asks him to go inside. The ex-deputy, who has been observing all this, finally decides to take action. He asks the local cop if the sheriff knows about this. It turns out that since Courtney has custody of the kids, Clint can't take them without a proper warrant or the sheriff's presence. Upon hearing this, the local cop realizes that the man is right, and doesn't argue with him anymore. He tells Clint that he may lose his job if his superiors find out. Hence, Clint is forced to leave for now, but he threatens to come back again. Afterward, Courtney thanks the ex-deputy for his help, and says she needs to leave this place. But for some reason, he sternly warns her against it, saying it would make her look like a flight risk to the court. Courtney agrees to stay, but she's still worried that her husband might come back again, so she pleads with the ex-deputy to stay with them for the night. That evening, after dinner, the ex-deputy reveals to Courtney that he was fired from his job after the death of the Oswalds. He explains that it was because he was the last person to speak with Ellison, and the last one seen in their home. Although he was cleared of all charges, his boss was still furious and fired him for no reason. Elsewhere, Dylan is approached by Milo once again. Milo wants to show him another video, and although Dylan is annoyed, he agrees. In the basement, a new kid starts playing his video. The footage begins as usual, appearing to be a normal family video at first. However, things take a terrifying turn when the family members are tied up in their kitchen, sitting in a pool of water, and then electrocuted. As soon as the footage ends, a horrified Dylan rushes back to his bed, but we notice that his brother has been watching him. The next moment, Zach heads to the basement and does something shocking. He confronts Milo, demanding to know why they chose Dylan instead of him. Milo responds that it's because he isn't smart or good enough to be one of them. He also warns Zach that if he tells about this to anyone, he will come and kill his entire family. The next morning, the ex-deputy leaves the house, and advises Courtney not to move out for now. He later meets with Dr. Stomberg, who has obtained a radio that once belonged to Professor Jonas. It turns out the radio originally belonged to a Norwegian family murdered in 1973. Stomberg plays a chilling recording, where a young girl screams that the Bagul cannot hear her over her mother's screams. She then murders her family, followed by the sound of her playing the piano. After this, Dr. Stomberg explains a pagan deity named Bagul, who consumes children. The ex-deputy is already familiar with this, as Ellison had been researching it before his death. It turns out that, even before Oswald's, many mysterious family murders had occurred in different cities. Stomberg elaborates that Bagul is believed to be reachable through ritual or sacrifice, and feeds on the corruption of the innocent. He concludes that all the cases he has studied share three common features: a murdered family, missing children, and an iconological totem in the form of music, literature, or art, used as a means of summoning the Bagul. We also learn that if someone moves into a house where murders occurred, their family will eventually become victims as well. However, Bagul cannot harm them, unless they move out of the house. This is exactly what happened with the Oswalds, so to break the curse, the ex-deputy burned down his house, and started investigating similar murder sites. This is why he strongly discouraged Courtney from moving out. The two men realize that Bagul manipulates or possesses the children, causing them to kill their own families. The ex-deputy thus instructs Stomberg to destroy the radio, which could also be used to summon the devil. Back at the house, Zach becomes increasingly jealous of his brother and starts brutally beating him. He forces Dylan to say that Zach is better than him.
Say you're nothing. Say you're weak.
At this moment, the ghostly children appear, causing Zach to become terrified and flee. The children then urge Dylan to fight back against his brother and kill him, as well as get rid of his abusive dad, and his mom, who did nothing to stop the abuse. That evening, Milo and the other children persuade Dylan to watch another disturbing video. He refuses as usual, but they insist that tonight is the final night, and if he does not comply, Bagul will hurt them. Soon, Milo finally shows him a video of the church murders of his family. It happened in the same location where they're currently staying. The video depicts Milo drugging his entire family, and nailing them to the floor by their wrists. Following that, Bagul summons rats, who jump onto each family member's stomach. Milo then covers the rats with metal bowls, and secures them to each victim's stomach with steel straps. He places hot coals on top of the bowls, causing the rats to gnaw their way through the victims, eviscerating them to death. Upon seeing this, Dylan has had enough and tries to leave. The kids insist that he must watch one last video, but he refuses and runs away. They chase him throughout the house, until he eventually hides in the church hall. When they catch up to him, Dylan declares that he doesn't want to be like them. However, Milo doesn't care, and informs Dylan that he has already done exactly what they wanted him to do. After some time, a confused Dylan enters the basement, and is shocked to see Zach watching disturbing videos on the projector. He tries to stop his brother, but receives a slap to the face instead. Milo then threatens him, saying that if he tells anyone about this, they will kill his entire family, and then watch the video repeatedly. It turns out that they never intended for Dylan to join them. Their actual goal was to provoke Zach, and fill him with hatred so that he would agree to kill his family. The next morning, Clint arrives at the farmhouse again, this time with a legal notice and the town sheriff. He gives Courtney two options: either she can go bankrupt in the process of filing for custody, or she can return home and be with her sons. Courtney knows that he's going to win the case anyway, so she reluctantly agrees to go with him. She then approaches Dylan, and asks him to come with her. The boy is terrified to leave, but his mother urges him to be strong, as there's no way out this time. And after the mom leaves, Zach smiles at Dylan, as his act will soon begin. Later in the evening, when the ex-deputy returns to the farmhouse, he is shocked to discover that Courtney and her family have moved out. This means that they have enabled themselves to become the next target of Bagul. The ex-deputy tries to call Courtney, only to receive an abusive response from Clint. Clint and his family having an awkward family dinner. During this, Dylan refuses to eat, saying he's not hungry. But then, Clint! He finally stops after Courtney shouts at him. Later, the ex-deputy arrives at the house and tries to speak with Courtney. The ex-deputy tries to explain how their whole family is in grave danger. But the aggressive man believes he is his wife's lover, and viciously beats him up. After he finally stops, he orders him to never come near his wife again. The next day, we see Clint spending time with his family and teaching Dylan some golf, while the ghost kids hand over a camera to Zach, and he starts filming his family members. He then places the camera on a tripod and joins his family, where he secretly drugs their drinks. But Dylan realizes something is wrong, so he immediately texts the ex-deputy and asks for his help. The scene then cuts to the evening, where Courtney, Dylan, and Clint are hung like scarecrows, which looks like Dylan's nightmare from the opening scene. A possessed Zach pours gasoline on his family, and immediately sets fire to his father. He watches in amusement as Clint dies a painful death. Up next, Zach proceeds to eliminate Dylan. But then all of a sudden, fortunately, the ex-deputy arrives just in time and runs him over with his vehicle. After freeing Courtney and Dylan, they all flee into the cornfield. However, Zach survives the attack, and begins chasing them with a sickle. He even manages to slice the ex-deputy's fingers, injuring him badly. Shortly after, the trio manages to hide in the house, and treat the wound, before going into hiding. Soon, Zach also arrives, and the other ghost kids help Zach track the trio down. The kids then go wild, tossing books and papers all over the house to scare them. All the ghost kids push a desk onto the ex-deputy, and throw a heavy thing on him. Up next, the ghost kids corner Zach's family in the living room to finish what he started. But just as Zach is about to strike them, the ex-deputy intervenes and knocks the camera out of his hand. Since it is now destroyed, Zach can no longer record the murder of his family. This sends the boy into a state of panic and he rushes to the attic in search of another camera. But he finds nothing, and the ghost children begin to shame him for failing to kill his entire family. They reveal that Bagul will be furious, and now he will have to face the consequences. Soon, Bagul himself appears, and makes the boy rapidly transform into a skeleton, while the projection screen also catches fire. Courtney desperately looks for Zach, but the house starts to burn down. And so, the ex-deputy reveals that Zach is already gone, and eventually leads them out of the house. In the final scene, the trio arrives at the motel where the ex-deputy is staying, and he goes inside to collect his belongings. But when he enters the room, he is shocked to see the same radio that he had requested Stomberg to destroy. He then hears voices of ghost children, which conclude with the mocking voice of a young girl repeatedly saying "Deputy." Okay guys, thanks for watching. See you again in the next video.